Now it's raining literally cats and dogs in Arthur C. Clarke's mysterious world.
What is the missile from the sky which still baffles the Rockingham County Sheriff? What was it that hammered a hole in this house in Hampshire? Can it really be that living fish can rain from the sky?
A fishy story at Hughenden Airport in Queensland today. A tropical downpour up there was apparently accompanied by hundreds of live fish which literally rained out of the sky. Locals quickly spotted that the slippery little customers were tasty freshwater perch, and soon the fish weren't flying but frying. Eyewitnesses, some of them teetotal at that, swore that the fish came from the clouds, though how they got there is anyone's guess.
Mysteries from the files of Arthur C. Clarke, author of 2001 and inventor of the communications satellite. Now in retreat in Sri Lanka after a lifetime of science, space and writing, he ponders the riddles of this and other worlds.
I'm almost embarrassed to tell you this because many of you simply won't believe me, but a most extraordinary thing happened right here in my local swimming club in Colombo, where every day I play table tennis with my partner here, Sarath. And quite recently, he told me an extraordinary thing. Sarath, tell me what it was happened that day.
That day I saw some 4 or 5 fish under this Christmas tree here.
Under this tree?
Yeah.
And were they lying on the ground?
Yeah.
What did you feel when you saw them? What do you think?
I thought they'd come from the rainbow.
I see. You thought the fish might have fallen from the rainbow. Well, it's curious. I have known about this kind of thing for 40 years, but I never dreamt that it would have happened right on my doorstep. I mean, what an extraordinary thing, fish falling from the sky.
It would be about 6:15 in the evening, a summer's evening.
During World War II, Yorkshireman Joe Alpin was stationed with the Artists' Rifles at Alton Towers in Staffordshire. That particular evening, he was driving in the deer park in an army truck.
The sky suddenly darkened, very, very dark indeed, like a thunderstorm. And then the frogs came, millions of them, raining out of the sky. Millions upon millions of frogs, about a half-inch long. They fell all over us, all over the grass, all over the cars, down the neck of our tunics, on our feet, hands everywhere. And they were very minute things, you know, no bigger than a dice or a small cube of sugar, little tiny things. And it wasn't possible to walk on them at all. We couldn't do anything. When the vehicles came to a standstill, we seemed to be, we all had one idea. We just switched the ignition off and waited for them to stop coming down. And it rained frogs for at least an hour and a quarter.
Mrs. Sylvia Moday also experienced an aerial avalanche. On June the 12th, 1954, she took her children to Platt's Meadow in Sutton Coldfield. The local paper reported the naval display they had gone to see, but missed some real news.
It was a horrible day. Typical summer's day, actually, in Britain. It was raining all the time, but this was a very heavy shower. We'd actually been and bought my little daughter a little red umbrella, and we heard something thudding against the umbrella. And when we looked, to our amazement, it was a shower of frogs. And they still were coming from the skies. There were hundreds of them. Our umbrella was covered, all our shoulders were covered. And as we looked up, we could see them coming down like snowflakes. And all at once, when we looked down, the ground was absolutely covered with them, hundreds of them. It was an area of about 50 square yards, I should think.
My interest in mysteries was first triggered when I read stories of frogs falling from the sky. These had been collected in the early part of this century by a remarkable American named Charles Fort, who spent much of his life in dusty libraries digging up old newspaper clippings. He wrote these up in a series of remarkable and often witty books with intriguing titles like Lo and the Book of the Damned. Besides frogs, Charles Fort recorded falls of fish, grain, cinders, ants, worms, and most remarkable of all, a turtle encased in ice, and even an alligator, which fell on American towns in the 1890s. Amazingly, such falls are not uncommon. Charles Fort mentions one which occurred right here in Cinnamon Gardens, again not more than half a mile from my house in Colombo. It's reported by Sir James Emerson Tennant, who wrote an important natural history of Ceylon. He was riding through here when he saw a heavy rainstorm. When he reached the spot, he discovered that the ground was covered with little fish wriggling around. Now, this is at least a mile from the sea, and there are no lakes or ponds or rivers around. Sri Lanka is by no means the only place where fish have been recorded falling from a clear sky.
In 1948, Mr. Ian Patey, a former British amateur golf champion, had just started to play around at the Barton-on-Sea Golf Club on the cliff tops near Bournemouth.
I was playing a mixed match with my wife about 6 o'clock on a June evening, and we were coming down this second fairway, and she was about to play a second shot from just over there. And just before she hit it, a fish fell down on the ground in front of us, and then we looked up in the sky, and suddenly there were hundreds of fishes falling in an area of about 100 yards. They were alive. They were about that size. They were larger than whitebait and possibly smaller than a sardine. My reaction was one of complete surprise. After all, there wasn't a cloud in the sky. You didn't suspect anything could fall out of the sky like that. There was no prior sort of evidence that anything was going to happen, like a thunderstorm.